let's get it. The big black book. What's going on, everybody? I'm Emmett Jarvis, and I'm sharing my journey through the United States Army with all of you. It's been pretty fun so far, I think. We've already covered why did I decide to even join the Army in the first place, basic training, part 1 and 2. So as soon as I got done with our 1 station unit training at Fort Benning, Georgia for infantrymen, I had a brief stay at the United States Army Airborne School, basic airborne course, as part of my Option 40 Airborne Ranger pipeline contract. Well, I got kicked out of airborne school. It was a misunderstanding. I'll go into it later on. Spoiler alert, I go back to airborne school. So I came down on orders, and I was stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana. They didn't even have an icon on the Army map for the unit that was at Fort Polk, Louisiana at that time in 2001. I ended up getting stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana. It was depressing, and it was right around Thanksgiving of 2001. The first school that I went to was the Combat Lifesaver course. Wa-boom! I'm fresh out of OSUT, all right? This is fast forwarding about 8 months later, because I've been with the unit for a while now. I've already went and done field training exercises, weapons qualification courses, all the things that like an infantryman has to be able to do. As far as like cyclical training and stuff like that, we were doing it. About 8 months later, from when I showed up to Fort Polk, Louisiana, I ended up going to the Combat Lifesaver course. And let's just kind of like break this down to make it make sense for you guys who may not know what Combat Lifesaver course is. The Combat Lifesaver course is a system that's taught to soldiers in the Army, not just infantrymen, not just war, everybody, right? Everybody should, and I believe it was kind of like a requirement for a while. Everybody had to go through Combat Lifesaver course, which is where you learn how to essentially, like life-saving techniques and procedures to be able to extend a wounded soldier's life on the battlefield until they can get to the appropriate level of medical care. We're talking about basic stuff like, you know, keeping the airway open, keeping the heartbeat going, how to stop bleeding, create like a pressure dressing, you know, how to do a tourniquet, you know, how to treat for shock, you know, all these things. Kind of learn like a systematic approach on how to prolong somebody's life really in combat. And I feel like the course did a really good job of that. The one thing that I didn't like and I never understood was the nasopharyngeal tube. I had some issues with some of this stuff, as I found out later on in my career due to like real world experiences. The nasopharyngeal tube kind of lined up as one of those tools that I just never used, because I saw what could happen if you didn't know what you were dealing with as far as an injury that was to the head. I saw in like real time like what could happen if somebody made a mistake, all right? So, and I'm not throwing any shots at anybody in any unit that I was ever in, but I'm just saying the nasopharyngeal tube, for me, I took that out of my kit and I just never used it. Combat Lifesaver course, pretty easy course. I believe it was like a week-long course. It was, yeah, 13th to the 18th of July, 2002. You start off with like a lot of heavy book information, all the medical terms, and you're not really learning like pharmaceutical stuff. You're really just learning acronym for cold weather injury. Here's another acronym for like a heat casualty. Here's how you avoid being a heat casualty. Here's how you avoid being a cold weather casualty. Here are some steps you can take, you know, if you start experiencing any of these 1 through 50 symptoms for like heat casualty or cold weather casualty. So like, if you can identify symptoms early, then you can kind of treat for it and get ahead of it. And the whole idea is like you can prevent more extreme injuries, right? And that paid off, especially in training, like in Fort Polk, Louisiana. It's like, horribly hot and humid, which was good because later on we ended up going overseas into a very hot environment, and it benefited us a lot. Like just something as simple as like, you know, untying your boots blousers, you know, like so that airflow can get in and up and through your legs, you know, rolling up your sleeves on your duty top, you know, so that you can get airflow going through, loosening your belt a little bit. Just simple things that you can kind of do to really you know, keep yourself going a little bit more. It's like anything else, man. Like we're a human being and we're like an engine, and they were teaching us ways to diagnose our engines and then keep our engines running as efficiently as possible for as long as humanly possible. All right, so it was like a lot of good information. And then we rolled into the classroom portion of here's different tools that we have and like our IFAC. We got to play around with tourniquets, and that was really cool. We used like some field expedient methods. Like if you were in the field and you didn't have like a cat tourniquet, which when I first came in the Army, there were no cat tourniquets being issued out. It was like, go find a stick and get like a bandage, you know, like one of the cravats or whatever. And like you would have to like have opposing tension on it so that when you turned it like a windlass, you know, you'd be able to stop the bleeding and then lock it in place. It was kind of like an archaic like system. So we started going into tourniquets. We started going into how to stop the bleed, or what to, one, identify the bleeding, you know, and it was like venous, capillary, or arterial, how like, you know, one will spray, one will ooze, and one will drip, you know, one's dark blue, you know, one's like bright red, and one's kind of like in the middle. And, you know, these are like good things to know. It's like, you know that there's a clock, general time frame you have to get that person from where they're at to where they need to go in order for their life to be saved. Now we get into kind of putting it all together. That is the culminating event of combat lifesaver courses. You know, you get in and you have the symptoms that you're told this person has in front of you, this casualty, and your job is to assess, diagnose, and treat the symptoms that this casualty in front of you has and do it effectively. And then, you know, you'd have like an observer, like one of the medics that would like tell you, hey, this is what you did well, this is what you didn't do so well, and move on. The cool thing about CLS courses, like once you get your certificate and you graduate, the training didn't stop there. There was such a huge emphasis placed on, we need to know this. Like we can make holes all day, but do we know how to plug them? Can we stop ourselves and the people around us from dying and bleeding out due to injuries that, had we diagnosed and identified and diagnosed and treated earlier, like they'd still be here, right? So the idea was to be able to prolong life as long as humanly possible, to get them out of a really bad situation and to a level of care that could take care of any and every need that they had, so that we're not talking about folded flags, you know, coming off of coffins at Arlington National Cemetery anymore, right? Like that's a life saved, so we don't have to have a memorial service for people. Combat Lifesavers course like really was like the beginning of my education when it came to medical training. And medical became one of those things very quickly that was like one of like the top 5 things you had to be an expert in, period. So that was my story. It was a really good course. It taught me a lot. And, you know, honestly, like it gave me a ton of confidence. I don't know. I think that's about it. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey talking about my military career and files coming straight out of this I Love Me book. If you have any comments, drop them in the comment section below. If you have any questions, do that too. We'll see you out there next week for Unit Armorers course. Let's go, Jarvis. All right. I love me. Boop. Don't hit the tripod, Malinois. I might have to use my CLS skills if you bite me. Luxury. Exquisite.